Westbrook Technologies celebration, my daughter-in-law Sophie greeted me with a bright, practiced laugh. "Oh, this is Martha, Michael's mother. Our little leech," she said lightly, as if it were a joke. The room went silent for a beat. I stood there in my best navy dress, clutching a modest handbag, heat rising in my cheeks. 5 years had passed since my husband Robert died, yet here I was, labeled a burden in front of my son's colleagues. Michael offered only a tight, uncertain smile. Sophie's voice dripped with condescension as she added, "She's always around our house. Can't really manage on her own." I excused myself and escaped to the restroom, Sophie's tinkling laughter echoing behind me. Staring at my reflection, gray streaks in my hair, tired eyes, I saw a woman they knew nothing about. Because the truth was this: I own 51% of Westbrook Technologies. The company they were celebrating that night existed because Robert and I once mortgaged our tiny home and worked through endless nights to build it. On his deathbed, Robert made me promise to keep that secret so Michael could prove himself without the weight of our success. For 5 years, I honored that promise. I lived simply, attended board meetings through a proxy, and let my son climb the ladder on his own. Later that evening, I overheard Sophie whisper to Michael, "Your mother is embarrassing. She shouldn't keep coming to these events. She's holding you back." My heart ached as Michael sighed. "I'll talk to her. Maybe it's time to look at that retirement place." They never noticed me slip away to call a taxi. Watching the city lights blur through my tears, I made a quiet decision. Robert never foresaw Sophie, her ambition, her subtle cruelty. I had stayed in the shadows out of love, but now it was time to protect my legacy and my dignity. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, a cold cup of tea beside a photo of Robert and me opening our first tiny office. We were young, exhausted, and proud. Sophie thinks I'm a helpless hanger-on. She's about to learn who really built the world she enjoys. The words from that first day still echoed in my mind. "We did it," Robert had whispered in my ear. "This is only the beginning, Martha. Who could have imagined that our tiny startup would become the multi-million-dollar company it is today? A company where my own son now works, never suspecting that his parents built it from scratch." The doorbell broke my reverie. James Patterson stood on the porch, leather briefcase in hand. At 71, he was still sharp as ever, the only person besides me who knew the full truth about my ownership of Westbrook. "You sounded worried on the phone," he said as I led him to the living room. I told him everything: Sophie's cutting remarks, Michael's silence, their quiet talk of moving me to a retirement community. James listened without interrupting, his thick eyebrows drawing together. "It's been 5 years, Martha," he said at last. "Maybe it's time to tell Michael the truth." I shook my head. Robert wanted him to succeed on his own, and he hasn't. "Exactly," James replied. "He's earned his place." "But Robert never meant for you to be treated this way." He opened his briefcase and slid a folder across the coffee table. "Westbrook's quarterly report. The company's thriving. Your shares are worth more than triple what they were when Robert passed. You could buy 10 estates larger than whatever house Sophie likes to flaunt." I flipped through the pages, numbers that represented decades of sacrifice, risk, and long nights. Nearly 28 years of relentless work. "Did I ever tell you about the beginning?" I asked quietly. James settled back, giving me space. "We were so young when we met," I began. "Robert was fixing computers for a living. I was a receptionist in the same office. Our first apartment on Maple Street had a leaky ceiling and a heater that barely worked. Robert would bring home broken machines and repair them at the kitchen table while I kept the books and ordered parts. He saved every penny until we could start a business of our own." I smiled at the memory, those lean years filled with purpose. Robert writing code late into the night while I called potential clients and balanced accounts. We were terrified, but when we landed our first big contract, we felt unstoppable. When I became pregnant with Michael, we feared it would all fall apart, I continued. I worked until the day my water broke and was back at the phones 3 weeks later, Michael asleep in a bassinet beside me. He grew up with the hum of computers and the sound of his parents dreaming out loud. Michael had seen it all, but he was too young to remember. By the time he reached high school, the company was stable enough for a more normal life. Robert and I agreed he shouldn't feel pressured to join the business. We even sold our house and downsized so it would look as though we were paying his college tuition ourselves, not with company profits. Ironically, Michael chose Westbrook anyway, hired on his own merit, climbing the ladder step by step. Then Robert fell ill. The cancer moved swiftly. In those final hours, he made me promise. Don't tell Michael about the shares. Let him stand on his own. The company will be his legacy, but his success must be his own. After Robert passed, I honored that promise. I transferred most of his shares into my name, keeping our controlling interest. A small portion went into a trust for Michael that won't mature until his 40th birthday, still 5 years away. As far as Michael knows, his father left only a modest inheritance. Sophie came into the picture 3 years ago, I told James. From day one, she made it clear she thought Michael could do better than his simple mother. She never misses a chance to critique my clothes or my small house, always hinting that I need someone to manage me. And Michael allows it, James asked, his tone suddenly sharp. He's caught in the middle, I sighed. Sophie's ambitious. She sees him as her ticket to the life she wants. A life you could provide with a single phone call, James pointed out. I looked down at a faded photograph of Robert and me, two young dreamers who'd actually built something that lasted. I've kept my promise, I said softly. But at what cost? James closed his briefcase with a decisive click. Then let's review your options, Martha, he said. Legally, Westbrook Technologies was mine to guide. As James and I discussed next steps, a quiet resolve settled over me. Not revenge, but clarity. Robert had wanted to shield our son from entitlement, never to turn me into a silent bystander. Change was overdue. The following week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I visited Westbrook headquarters, not as the majority shareholder, but simply as Michael's mother, bringing him lunch the way I used to before Sophie arrived. The gleaming glass tower downtown looked nothing like the cramped office where Robert and I once worked side by side. At reception, a young woman glanced at my simple outfit with barely hidden curiosity. I'm here to see Michael Westbrook, I said. I'm his mother. She hesitated, then called upstairs. Moments later, Michael appeared, surprise and a flicker of discomfort on his face. Mom, what are you doing here? I brought your favorite, I said, holding up the bag. Chicken salad on sourdough. His shoulders softened. You didn't have to. He led me to a small break room instead of his office. I understood. He didn't want colleagues judging his unfashionable mother. You look tired, sweetheart, I said, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. He ran a hand through his hair, so much like his father. Big project. Sophie's been stressed too. She set on that house in Lakewood Estates. We can't afford it unless I land this promotion. Lakewood Estates, multi-million-dollar homes for executives and old money. That's quite ambitious, I said carefully. Sophie thinks it's the right neighborhood for my career track. She's already talking to designers, he replied with a weary smile. You know how she is when she sets her mind on something. After lunch, I asked to use the restroom, but instead wandered the halls of the company Robert and I had built. A few longtime employees nodded politely, unaware of who I truly was. On the executive floor, most offices were empty for lunch, except for a conference room where Sophie's voice carried through the slightly open door. She wasn't supposed to be there today. Trust me, David, it's a perfect arrangement, she said, her tone unsettlingly intimate. Michael gets the promotion, you get the contract, and I keep everyone happy. A man's voice, low and amused, replied, And how will you convince the board? They're cautious about the Asia expansion. Michael has a presentation next week, Sophie answered. I've helped him prepare it. Once he's VP of operations, he can push your proposal through. And your husband? The man asked. Michael sees what I want him to see, Sophie laughed. He's so eager for approval. It's almost too easy. My pulse pounded. Was this an affair or a calculated business scheme? There's still the issue of the hidden shareholder, the man said. No one knows who controls those shares since the founder passed. Michael thinks everything will eventually transfer to some trust. Silence followed, then sounds that left no doubt about the nature of their meeting. I slipped away, heart racing. Back home, I called James immediately. Within an hour, he arrived with Sarah Miller, Westbrook's retired CFO, and my board proxy. Sophie is involved with someone named David, I explained, describing the conversation and Michael's upcoming presentation. Sarah's face hardened. David Reynolds, she said. He runs a consulting firm pushing a risky expansion into Asia. The board has resisted him so far. If Michael becomes VP and champions it, that resistance could crumble. James added grimly. They're using my son, I said, the realization bitter on my tongue. And Sophie thinks Michael will inherit controlling interest, I continued, recounting her remarks about the unknown shareholder. James and Sarah exchanged troubled glances. She's positioning herself for when she believes those shares come to Michael, Sarah said quietly. My hands trembled. And Michael, where does he fit into her plans? Neither of them answered. Their silence said everything. There's something else, I whispered. That night I overheard a phone call that chilled me. Sophie was urging Michael to move me into Sunset Valley Retirement Community. She's becoming difficult to manage, she said. It would be better for everyone. James' eyebrows shot up when I told him. That's a very expensive place, he said. Yes, I replied. And apparently Michael would need to sell my house to afford it. The house Robert and I paid off long ago. The home that's worth a small fortune now. Sarah's voice hardened. This is serious, Martha. Sophie's not only steering Michael's career, she's trying to control your life as well. I walked to the window, looking out over the garden Robert and I had planted together. I made a promise to my husband, I said softly, but I don't think he would want this. What do you want to do? James asked. My mind was clear. Protect my son and the company we built. But if I reveal everything now, Michael might retreat even further under Sophie's influence. A subtle move then, Sarah suggested. I nodded. Next week's board meeting, I'll attend, not as Martha Westbrook, but as Mr. Wilson, the silent shareholder. I need to see exactly what Sophie and this David are plotting. And if Michael recognizes you? James asked. I allowed a small smile. Sophie has made sure no one expects to see Martha Westbrook in a boardroom. Sometimes being invisible is an advantage. When James and Sarah left to make arrangements, a calm determination settled over me. Sophie thought she was playing a clever game, using my son as a pawn. She had no idea she was up against the woman who built the board itself. The day of the meeting dawned with a driving rain, fitting for the storm inside me. I studied my reflection in the mirror. Gone was the quiet woman in practical clothes. Sarah had insisted that Mr. Wilson must look every inch a power player. I wore a charcoal gray pinstripe suit, crisp white blouse, and low heels that still felt strange. My hair, freshly cut into a sleek bob and tinted a warm chestnut, framed a face, enhanced with discreet makeup. I touched the gold watch Robert gave me on our 25th anniversary. He'd be proud, Sarah said from the doorway. Today you protect everything you built together. Westbrook Technologies boardroom occupied the top floor, its walls of glass overlooking the city. I entered with Sarah, remembering her coaching. Confident, reserved, observant, heads turned. For years, the mysterious majority shareholder had sent only proxies. Now Mr. Wilson had arrived in person. Michael sat near the center, tense. Sophie, who held no official role, occupied a seat beside a sharply dressed man I guessed was David Reynolds. Ah, Sarah, said Richard Foster, the board chair. And this must be Mr. Wilson? Here to observe today's proceedings, Sarah supplied smoothly. I nodded, silent, and took a seat near the head of the table. Michael frowned, curiosity flickering across his face, but my tailored suit and new hairstyle kept my secret safe. Sophie, less subtle, watched me with narrowed eyes. The meeting began with routine reports. I spoke only when necessary, concise and measured, just as Sarah advised. Michael's puzzled glances returned again and again. Sophie's scrutiny sharpened. Finally, Richard announced, next item, presentation on the proposed Asian market expansion by Michael Westbrook. Michael rose, adjusting his tie. As he began, I saw Robert in him. The same thoughtful intelligence, the careful way he broke down complex ideas. But beneath that poise ran something Robert never carried. A desperate need to impress. His plan called for opening offices in Singapore and Shanghai, pouring millions into speculative software tailored to those markets. The numbers sparkled on the screen, ambitious, bordering on impossible. I listened, heart heavy, as my son staked his future and our company's legacy on Sophie's dangerous ambition. As you can see, Michael concluded, our projected return on investment would reach 27% within 18 months, with potential for exponential growth after that. I scanned the boardroom. Most members looked unconvinced. Only David Reynolds nodded eagerly. Very impressive. he said. My consultancy has strong contacts in both markets. We can fast-track entry and cut startup costs. Sophie beamed at Michael, the picture of supportive pride. The performance turned my stomach. Richard, the board chair, folded his hands. The investment required is substantial, and these projections are conservative, David interrupted smoothly. Our market research is thorough. I'd heard enough. It cleared my throat. The room fell silent. Mr. Westbrook, I said, formally addressing my own son, your enthusiasm is commendable, but I see several weaknesses in this plan. I asked pointed questions about his market data, risk modeling, and contingency plans. With each one, Michael's confidence faltered. Sophie's smile hardened. Who exactly are you to question this proposal? She demanded. Michael has worked tirelessly on this. Sophie, Michael muttered, embarrassed. No, Michael. Some mysterious shareholder who never shows up suddenly appears to undermine you? That isn't right. I met her glare. Mrs. Westbrook, I'm fulfilling my duty as a major investor. This proposal risks millions. Based on projections that seem influenced by outside interests, I let my eyes rest on David. He shifted in his seat. Richard and the rest of the board exchanged uneasy looks. I move that we table this proposal pending a full review, I said evenly, and that we investigate Mr. Reynolds' relationship with Westbrook Technologies before any partnership moves forward. The vote was swift and decisive. The plan was put on hold. As the meeting broke up, Sophie swept out, David close behind. Michael lingered, shoulders slumped. I approached him as Mr. Wilson, not as his mother. Mr. Westbrook, your core idea has merit, I said quietly. The execution needs work. I'd be happy to discuss improvements, if you'd like. He looked up, surprised. Thank you, Miss Wilson. I'd appreciate that. Then after a pause, have we met before? You seem familiar. My heart skipped. Perhaps in passing. I knew your father, I said, steady but gentle. His eyes widened, but before he could speak, Sarah appeared at my side, guiding me toward the door. Only when the elevator doors closed did I exhale. That was harder than I expected, I admitted. You did well, Sarah said. The board was impressed, and you've bought time to deal with the real threat. Sophie, I murmured, and David. They're using my son. What will you do now? She asked. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors, a stranger in a tailored suit. The decision I'd wrestled with for days was suddenly clear. It's time to tell Michael the truth, I said softly. Not every detail at once, that might drive him away, but enough for him to understand what's happening. Sarah nodded. When? Tomorrow night, dinner, just the two of us. Outside, rain slicked the streets. 5 years of silence, of honoring Robert's wish to stay hidden, would end tomorrow. Or so I thought. Barely slept, rehearsing the words I would say. Morning came with dark clouds pressing low, inside and out. I was making coffee when the phone rang. Martha, we have a problem, James said without preamble. Sophie's moved fast. She's convinced Michael to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. They're proposing a full restructuring of the executive team. If it passes, members loyal to you will be removed. My hand froze on the coffee pot. On what grounds? They're claiming efficiency concerns. And there's more. Somehow Sophie's learned that Mr. Wilson is connected to you. Michael phoned Sarah this morning, asking pointed questions. He sounded upset. I set the pot down, heart pounding. I was going to tell him everything tonight. You might not have that luxury, James warned. The doorbell rang, cutting him off. Through the peephole, I saw Michael on my porch, his face dark with emotion. I drew a deep breath and opened the door. Michael, I wasn't expecting you until... Were you ever going to tell me? He demanded, stepping past me into the hall. Or was the plan to keep this from me forever? I shut the door, my pulse racing. Please, let me explain. Explain what? That you're Mr. Wilson? That you've owned Westbrook all along while I built my career in the dark? He ran a hand through his hair, so like his father's gesture, it hurt to watch. What was it, Mother? Some kind of joke, a test? No, I said firmly. Never that. Please, sit down so I can tell you everything. He stayed standing, arms crossed. How did you even find out? I asked. Sophie, he said. She hired a private investigator after the board meeting. She thought it was suspicious that this Wilson person suddenly appeared and blocked my proposal. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she did. Is it true? Michael pressed. Do you control Westbrook Technologies? Yes, I answered, meeting his eyes. Your father and I founded the company before you were born. When he died, I inherited his shares. I own 51% of Westbrook. He stared as though seeing a stranger. All these years you've lived in this little house, driving that old car, while you were worth millions? Yes, I said simply. Why? Why hide it? Why let me work there without knowing? Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels? It was your father's wish, I said quietly. He wanted you to succeed on your own merits, without the shadow of being the owner's son. He believed it would make you stronger. And you, Michael's voice cracked. What did you want? The question cut deep. I wanted to honor his dying request and to protect you. Protect me from what? Success, wealth, my own name? From the doubt that would follow you if everyone knew, I said. From people wondering if you earned your position. He was silent for a long moment. And the board meeting yesterday? Why undermine me? I had concerns about the plan. The numbers were unrealistic, and David Reynolds worries me. His eyes narrowed. What about David? I chose my words carefully. His track record is troubling. I believe he's not acting in the company's best interests. Sophie says he's brilliant, Michael said, defensive. She says the board is afraid of innovation. Have you checked David's background yourself? I asked gently. Or are you relying only on Sophie's research? Uncertainty flickered across his face. You know about tomorrow's emergency meeting, he said. Yes. And I need you to understand. The restructuring Sophie is pushing would remove the very people who helped your father build this company. People who have protected its integrity for decades. Sophie says they're blocking progress. Hulich, he replied, but with less conviction. I opened a drawer and handed him the folder James had prepared. This outlines David Reynolds' history. 3 companies followed his expansion strategies. All 3 lost heavily. 1 went bankrupt. Michael hesitated, then took it. Why should I believe you now? You've hidden the truth for years. You're right. I wasn't fully honest about my role. But I have never lied about loving you or wanting what's best for you. He looked away, blinking quickly. Michael, I said softly. Think about how fast Sophie found out about me. Less than a day after the meeting. She was already investigating, already suspicious. She was protecting me, he said, but doubt had entered his voice. Was she? I asked quietly. Or was she protecting herself? He stood abruptly. I need time to think. Of course. But please, before tomorrow's meeting, read that folder. Ask yourself why Sophie is pushing so hard. At the door, he paused. All those board meetings? You were there, weren't you? As Mr. Wilson's proxy, I nodded. I wanted to stay connected to what your father and I built, and to you. Something shifted in his expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the anger. The board meets at 9 tomorrow, he said finally. I suppose you'll be there. I will, I replied, as myself. No more proxies. After he left, I called James and Sarah to tell them everything. We spent hours that night on calls with trusted board members, mapping every move Sophie might try. By the time I crawled into bed, I was drained, but resolved. Tomorrow would decide more than the future of Westbrook Technologies. It would define my relationship with my son. Just as I turned out the light, my phone chimed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Michael and Sophie dining with David Reynolds, their faces grim, their posture intent. Beneath it, one line. They're planning something bigger than a restructuring. Be prepared. I stared at the screen until I recognized the restaurant's familiar backdrop and the waitress at the edge of the frame, Diane, Robert's niece. She'd clearly overheard enough to warn me. I sent a quiet thank you and set the phone aside, a plan forming in my mind. If Sophie wanted a high-stakes game, she would find I knew how to play. Morning arrived with a steady rain. When I entered the boardroom, there was no disguise this time. Just Martha Westbrook in a tailored navy suit, silver hair perfectly styled. Robert's watch gleaming at my wrist. Conversation stopped. Directors who knew me only as Michael's quiet mother or as Sarah's mystery client stared in confusion. Sophie, seated beside Michael near the head of the table, went pale. David Reynolds leaned in, whispering something sharp in her ear. What is she doing here? Sophie hissed, loud enough for all to hear. This is a closed board meeting. Richard Foster, the chairman, looked uncertain. Mrs. Westbrook, I'm not sure. It's quite all right, Richard. I said calmly, placing my leather portfolio on the table. You'll find I have every right to be here. James Patterson stepped in behind me, briefcase in hand. Mrs. Westbrook is here as the majority shareholder, he announced. She holds 51% of Westbrook Technologies. A collective gasp rippled through the room. All eyes swung to Michael. His face was unreadable. This is absurd, Sophie blurted. Michael's father owned the company. The shares are in a trust until ... until Michael turns 40, I finished evenly. A small portion, yes. But the controlling interest passed to me when Robert died. Richard blinked in surprise. And the voting? Handled by Miss Miller for years, I said, nodding toward Sarah. And by me as Mr. Wilson when necessary. Another wave of shock swept the table. David Reynolds' polished confidence finally cracked. Mrs. Westbrook has documentation to confirm this, James added, holding up the papers. But perhaps we should proceed with the meeting's stated purpose. I sat directly across from Michael. He met my gaze. Pain flickering in his eyes, but also something else. Thought. Richard cleared his throat. Michael, you called this meeting to propose an executive restructuring. Michael straightened, voice steady. In light of new information, I'd like to propose a different agenda. Sophie whipped toward him. Michael, we discussed this. Stick to the plan. Silence fell. Michael opened the folder I'd given him the night before, the evidence of David Reynolds' failed ventures. I spent last night doing additional researching, he said, on our company's history, on Mr. Reynolds' record, and on the data supporting the Asian expansions. His eyes moved from Sophie to David to me. I found troubling inconsistencies. Michael, Sophie warned, her voice tight. He continued undeterred. Mr. Reynolds was involved with 3 companies that attempted similar expansions. All 3 suffered major losses. One went bankrupt. David's smile hardened. Markets involve risk, Michael. Your father understood that. My father, Michael replied, his emphasis sharp, built this company on careful growth. He never gambled with people's livelihoods. Pride swelled in my chest. And, Michael added, I discovered that the numbers in my proposal were based on manipulated data. Data you helped prepare, Sophie. Color rose in her cheeks. You're being ridiculous. I was helping you. Were you? Michael's voice cut through the room. Or were you helping David secure a multi-million-dollar consulting contract? David shot to his feet. I don't have to sit here and listen to these accusations. We spent that night calling every loyal board member, rehearsing every scenario Sophie might attempt. By the time I finally set my phone aside, I was drained but resolved. Tomorrow would decide everything. Westbrook Technologies, my son's future, and the fragile trust between us. Just as I reached for the bedside lamp, a text arrived from an unknown number. It was a photo. Michael and Sophie dining with David Reynolds, their faces tense and determined. Beneath it, a single line. They're planning something bigger than a restructuring. Be ready. I recognized the restaurant immediately, and the waitress at the edge of the frame. Diane, Robert's niece. She'd overheard enough to warn me. I sent back a quiet thank you and let a new plan take shape. If Sophie wanted a fight, she would discover that I knew exactly how to stand my ground. The next morning, rain streaked the windows as I entered the boardroom. No disguise this time, just Martha Westbrook in a tailored navy suit, silver hair neatly styled, Robert's watch on my wrist. Conversation stopped. Directors who knew me only as Michael's mother, or Sarah's mysterious client, turned in surprise. Sophie's eyes went wide. What is she doing here? She demanded. This is a closed board meeting. Richard Foster, the chairman, hesitated. Mrs. Westbrook, I'm not sure. It's quite all right, Richard, I said evenly, setting my leather portfolio on the table. You'll find I have every right to be here. James Patterson entered behind me, briefcase in hand. Mrs. Westbrook is present in her capacity as majority shareholder, he announced. She controls 51% of Westbrook Technologies. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Sophie's face drained of color. David Reynolds leaned forward, whispering urgently to her. Yes, I continued. A small portion of the company remains in trust for Michael, but controlling interest passed to me when Robert died. Miss Miller has voted those shares for years, sometimes under the name Mr. Wilson. Shock rolled across the table. David's polished calm began to fray. Mrs. Westbrook has documentation to confirm this, James added, producing the papers. But perhaps we should move on to the emergency agenda. I sat across from Michael. He met my eyes, the hurt still there, but also thoughtfulness. Richard cleared his throat. Michael, you called this meeting to propose restructuring. Michael stood, voice steady. In light of new information, I'd like to change that agenda. Sophie whipped toward him. Michael, we agreed. Stick to the plan. He opened the folder I'd given him the night before. I spent last night researching our company's history, Mr. Reynolds' record, and the data behind my proposal. I found serious inconsistencies. Michael, Sophie warned. He pressed on. Mr. Reynolds has been tied to 3 firms attempting similar Asian expansions. All 3 suffered major losses. One went bankrupt. David's smile thinned. Markets carry risk. Your father knew that. My father, Michael replied sharply, built this company on careful growth. He never gambled with livelihoods. Michael's next words silenced the room. The projections in my proposal were based on manipulated data Sophie helped prepare. Color flooded Sophie's cheeks. I was helping you. Were you, Michael asked, or were you helping David secure a multi-million-dollar contract? David shot to his feet. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Actually, you do, I said, my voice calm but firm. The board should also know about your ties to international tech partners. The company you recommended as our Asian manufacturing partner. James distributed fresh documents. That firm lists you as a silent partner, he explained, and records show you still receive consulting fees. Murmurs swept the boardroom. This is a witch hunt, David snapped. No, Michael answered quietly. This is due diligence, something I should have done from the start. I withdraw my proposal and recommend we end all ties with Reynolds Consulting. Michael, Sophie clutched his arm. You're ruining everything. He gently pulled away. No, Sophie. I'm stopping a disaster, and I'm ending the bigger mistake, us. Her expression hardened to ice. Your mother has been lying to you for years, controlling your career from the shadows. My mother, Michael said steadily, honored my father's wishes while protecting the company they built together. I'm only beginning to understand how much she's done for both of us. Richard cleared his throat. In light of these revelations, we'll adjourn to consider next steps. Board members filed out, leaving Sophie rigid in her chair. You've ruined everything, she hissed at me. The promotion, the house, everything. You had it planned, Michael corrected, using me as your stepping stone. Don't be naive, she snapped. Everyone uses everyone. Your precious mother used you too. There's a difference, as Michael said quietly. She acted out of love. You acted out of greed. Sophie grabbed her purse and stalked out, David trailing behind. At last, only Michael and I remained. I'm still angry, he said after a long silence. You should have told me the truth years ago. I know, I admitted. Keeping your father's promise became a habit, a shield. I was afraid if I told you, I'd lose you. Instead, I nearly lost you to someone else's manipulation. He exhaled, shoulders sagging. When did you know about Sophie and David? I suspected at the company party, I said, and confirmed it later at the office. He nodded. After I left your house, I called colleagues who'd worked with David. Everything you said checked out. And then I looked at Sophie's phone. His voice caught. They've been planning this for months, using me as their way in. Was I that blind, Mom? The single word Mom broke something open inside me. We see what we want to see in the people we love, I said softly. I've made my own mistakes, too. Michael moved closer, sitting beside me. What happens now? With the company? With us? I took his hand. That's up to you. Your father wanted you to build your own path, and you have. You're a capable businessman, Michael, with or without the Westbrook name. As for Sophie, I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. That choice is yours. But as both your mother and the majority shareholder, I'd advise a serious reconsideration. A faint smile touched his lips. Already ahead of you. I packed a bag this morning. 2 months later, I watched from the same boardroom as Michael presented a new proposal. A carefully researched expansion of our educational software division. The board approved it unanimously. Sophie was gone. Her divorce filings just began. David Reynolds had vanished towards some new target. Michael was staying in the guest house for now, healing from more than a broken marriage. He was reconnecting with his roots, the legacy Robert and I built. That evening, we sat on the back porch, watching the sun slip behind the garden Robert and I once planted. Mom, Michael said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about the company name. Oh, I sipped my tea. Everyone associates Westbrook with Dad. But you were always there too. Maybe it's time for a small change, something that tells the full story. What about Westbrook and Wilson Technologies? Tears stung my eyes. Your father would like that. And the mysterious Mr. Wilson? Michael teased with a faint smile. Any more appearances? I laughed softly. I think she's retired. Martha Westbrook is ready to stand in the open. As the last rays of light gilded the garden, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. Sophie had once called me a leech, never knowing I was the foundation of everything she coveted. Now the truth was out, and with it came something far better than revenge. Redemption, reconnection, and the chance to honor Robert's legacy and my own. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest power lies not in staying hidden, but in finally stepping forward to claim your place in the sun.